The United States and Saudi Arabia have signed what the White House is calling the largest arms sales agreement in history. The deal is valued at some $142 billion. The U.S. says that it will provide Saudi Arabia with state-of-the-art warfighting equipment. It was one of several deals signed by U.S. President Donald Trump as he met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh. Trump is on a 4-day trip to the Middle East, focused on securing investments in the United States. Ending the war in Gaza is also on the agenda, though Trump will not be visiting Israel. All right, let's go now to Washington. My colleague Janelle Dumalaon is going to put this trip into some perspective for us. So, Janelle, how historic is this Saudi arms deal, first of all?
Brent, it's certainly a very huge headline number, and according to the fact sheet that the White House released, this is an arms deal that is going to cover several categories, including Air Force advancement and space capabilities, air and missile defense, maritime and coastal security, border security and land forces modernization, information and communication systems upgrades. But what is not included, of course, in this fact sheet is exact details on what, in fact, is included in these categories, what is being sold when and at which volumes. So we're still waiting for more information on that. Until then, we're going to have to suspend our judgment on how historic it all is. But what this does tell us is how much this administration wants to prioritize this economic/defense relationship with Saudi Arabia. This is, of course, a relationship that has seen its fair share of knocks, looking back at 2021, when the Biden administration suspended arms sales to Saudi Arabia because of the country's role in the war in Yemen. Now, those arms sales resumed last year, Trump administration clearly wanting to ramp it up. And as you said, this is part of a package of investment deals, a $600 billion commitment, which the U.S. says the Saudis are committing to in the U.S. This is a number that Trump wants to get up to $1 trillion, but many have pointed out this is also roughly Saudi Arabia's GDP. As such, there might be concerns around the achievability of that number.
And Janelle, the weapons deal with Saudi Arabia, how does it compare with what Israel gets on a yearly basis in terms of military aid?
You know, it's an interesting question, quite a difficult comparison. Of course, Israel and the U.S. have that 10-year agreement where they see $3.3 billion in military assistance from the U.S. to Israel. But it's an interesting question because of sensitivities around what Saudi Arabia might end up buying from the U.S. So, for example, there's reporting from Reuters that one of the key discussion points on the table was the sale of U.S.-made F-35 warplanes to Saudi Arabia. Now, Israel does try to maintain a say in what U.S. arms are sold to its regional neighbors. As a U.S. ally, it's important to Israel to maintain what it calls its qualitative edge. So this is the guarantee that whatever weapons that Israel gets from the U.S. are superior to what their neighbors have. So again, the fact sheet, so Israel, for example, does have those F-35s. Now, the fact sheet doesn't say anything about whether Saudi Arabia is going to get them, but if it does, then that would mean Israel would not be the only Middle East state to have these F-35s.
Okay, and let's talk about the tech deals that have been signed by the Saudis. Talk to me about how important tech is to waging war and apparently also to keeping tabs on dissidents.
Yeah, so there have been a few tech deals outlined in what the White House has put out, but again, we don't really have so many details on that. We know, for example, that Data Vault, this Saudi Arabian company, is going to invest $20 billion in the U.S. We've only heard that Google, Oracle, and some other American companies are going to invest some $80 billion in both countries. But to get to your question, Brent, we know that part of this discussion in Saudi Arabia is going to be the U.S. potentially selling hundreds of thousands of AI chips. AI chips, of course, very important and has very important, has many applications, including in AI-enabled weaponry. And if the U.S. is going to end up selling at this volume, that would be a departure from established foreign policy of past administrations that prioritized slower sales to these countries because of their ties to China, because of their ties to authoritarian government. But as we've been saying this whole time, Trump has a different calculus in mind, one that prioritizes economic deal-making above all else, it would seem, and this trip shows that.
Yeah, the transactional president, he is. All right, Janelle Dumalaon with the latest from Washington. Janelle, thank you. All right, the Cairo-based journalist Karim El-Gawhary has more now on this trip and the deals that are being signed. Karim, how's the region viewing this huge weapons agreement between Saudi Arabia and the United States?
Well, until now, nothing really surprising. Everything follows a well-choreographed schedule. With the business deals already prepared in advance, like, for example, this defense deal worth $145 billion. In fact, the Saudis already, before Trump arrived in Saudi Arabia, committed to invest about $600 billion in the U.S. economy. Mind you, Trump himself announced that he wants to bring home $1 trillion. He needs a signal that his America First policy, of course, is bearing fruit, and he's hoping to get this now from the Gulf states. So all about business, but I don't think politics will be completely cut out in this 4-day trips to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Emirates. Gaza will be for sure on the schedule, but also when the Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara will come to Riyadh tomorrow, there's a possibility that he will meet President Trump. That will give the new Syrian regime some kind of more international legitimacy. Don't forget, Ahmed Shara 6 months ago was still on the US terrorist. Now, tomorrow, he's probably at least going to sit in the same room with Donald Trump.
I want to ask you, Karim, Egypt, where you are, doesn't play as big of a role in Trump's new vision for the Middle East as other countries. How concerned is Cairo about what appears to be a loss of American backing?
Well, Egypt lost its leading role in the region in the last decades towards Turkey, towards Iran, and of course in the Arab world towards Saudi Arabia. Egypt, of course, has by far not the same financial leverage than the Gulf states have. But Egypt's security apparatus is a very important channel, for example, towards Hamas. And so far, Egypt kept its red line not to allow to be any part of any kind of Palestinian displacement scheme in Gaza. So for now, yes, Egypt is not playing a leading role, but it's still important in the mediation.
And, you know, while we see the Saudis signing off on all kinds of artificial intelligence deals, which are crucial for the kingdom's development, I'm wondering, where does all of this leave the people of Gaza? We understand that Trump has no plans to visit Israel on this trip.
Well, the UN just reported that the whole population of the Gaza Strip is food insecure, saying in the last report that nearly 500,000 people facing an extreme lack of food and face starvation. So I don't think that can be ignored during a trip of a US president in the Arab world, as the US is, of course, seen as the most important ally of Israel. The question now is, will Trump push Netanyahu for an end of the Israeli offensive in Gaza, or will he follow Netanyahu's line and even expand this Israeli offensive? What we're seeing now, of course, is like two things that are not happening and that are very important, I think. One, as you already mentioned, Trump is not going to visit Israel on this trip. Also, the topic of normalization in the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel is not on the agenda. The Saudis are very clear. They are saying, like, as long as the Israeli offensive in the Gaza Strip is continuing, And as long there's no serious steps towards Palestinian statehood, there will be no more normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. So what we're seeing is what's important, what we don't see, what's not happening. And at the same time, we see now an independent policy of the US besides Israel, putting Israel on the sideline when they are talking now to Iran in Oman, when they have a ceasefire deal with the Houthis in Yemen, and when they now just opened a direct line with Hamas through Qatar. And all this is happening while Netanyahu is watching from the sidelines.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like he's being bypassed, that's for sure. Karim El-Gawhary with the latest from Cairo tonight. Karim, as always, thank you.
Well, let's take a closer look at this visit with Rama Jarmakani from DW Arabic. Welcome to the studio, Rama. So 3 countries in this visit. What are we likely to see?
Actually, the headline of the visit, it's economic and investment, if we could say, in the first place, and then we can talk about politics and defense also. Like in the beginning in Saudi Arabia, the headline of the visit, it's about arms sales and also defense agreements and investments. In Qatar, it will be investments, like the biggest headline, and also in UAE, it will be about artificial intelligence, AI, technology, investments. So this is like what we could say. And in the second place, everything about politics, Gaza, Syria, other files are going to come later.
OK. And how's this visit being seen in the Arab world? How big a deal is this?
Actually, it depends where you are looking for this visit from. So if you are talking about, if you are looking at that from Gaza side, like all people are like wishing that Trump will gonna have some new agreements. Also, what's leaked in the news last few days, maybe Trump will gonna recognize Palestinian states, which is like very important for Palestinians. If you are talking about that, or looking at this visit from Syria, Syrians are looking for economic sanctions release, or like maybe a new normalization with a new government now in Syria. So it depends where you are looking for this visit.
OK, so let's split that visit then. There's a commercial side to it, and there's the political side. Let's start with the commercial. So there was, you mentioned there's artificial intelligence in there, and Donald Trump has also brought with him a lot of business leaders, and there's lots of zeros being talked about in this deal making.
Yeah, actually, it was like very secret agenda on that. But like today's afternoon, Trump will gonna meet some of the biggest CEOs in Saudi Arabia, for example. And like all the media is talking about maybe meeting between Arab leaders, but media insists that it will be economic things. We're gonna like meet some companies talking about maybe oil investments or maybe oil prices, all this. But until now, like nothing. It was like a little bit secret, the agenda of what Trump will gonna discuss in Saudi Arabia or even in the other countries.
And on the politics, there will be a side meeting with Lebanon, Syria, and the Palestinians to talk about what?
Of course, like the region, Syria, which is very, very important now, talking about Syria with the new transitional government. We are talking about like people has Al-Qaeda background, so it's like concern for all the world. Also what's going on in the last few months in Syria, the massacres, about also the minority rights. So it's a very important thing to discuss, because like it's related to each other. Also in Lebanon, they're gonna talk about Hezbollah, the new era who will gonna control Lebanon, and even like the security of Israel, which is very important in this point.
OK, thanks for talking us through that, Rama Jarmakani from DW Arabic. Thank you so much.